We are about to witness the most brutal execution in history. First, they slice your back open, from your neck all the way down. Then, with an axe, they snap every single one of your ribs from your spine. They peel your back open like a book and pull your ribs out to make these giant bloody wings. But it gets worse. They literally pull your lungs out of your back while you're still alive and lay them on your shoulders so you can watch them take their last breaths. This is the Blood Eagle, and it is so insane you won't believe it's real. But was this insane ritual even real, or is it just a crazy story? And what could a king possibly do to deserve this? To find the answer, we have to go back to the 9th century to meet the king who got this done to him. King Ælla of Northumbria. This is the story of how one mistake got a king killed in the worst way imaginable and destroyed his entire kingdom. Before this guy was a victim, he was a king. But his kingdom, Northumbria, was a complete disaster. Back in the 9th century, England wasn't one country, it was a bunch of smaller kingdoms fighting each other. And Ælla's was in the middle of a civil war. The history books are a little fuzzy, but we know this guy probably wasn't even supposed to be king. He's called a tyrant, who literally stole the throne from another king named Osbert. Not only that, but he was stealing from the church too. So you've got this kingdom, totally broken, with 2 kings fighting for control. The nobles are divided, the armies are tired, and the whole place is about to collapse. Ælla might have had the crown, but he was barely hanging on. He made enemies at home, but he had no idea a much bigger problem was coming for him from across the ocean. He was about to mess with a legendary Viking, and it would cost him everything. And that legendary Viking was Ragnar Lothbrok. If Ælla is a ghost in the history books, Ragnar is a superstar. A literal king of Denmark and Sweden, this guy was a legend. The sagas, which are basically the epic superhero movies of the Viking Age, say he was the ultimate warrior. He fought giant snakes, he raided Paris, and his sons were even more famous. We're talking Bjorn Ironside and Ivar the Boneless. But here's where it all goes wrong. The stories say Ragnar got jealous that his sons were getting all the attention. So, to prove he was still the GOAT, he said he would conquer all of England with just 2 ships, an absolutely insane plan. But a massive storm completely wrecked his ships, and he washed up on the shores of the one kingdom he should have avoided. Ælla's, the most famous Viking in the world, just washed up in the kingdom of a tyrant king. This is where it all goes down. For King Ælla, finding Ragnar Lothbrok washed up on his beach was like winning the lottery. He just captured the world's most famous Viking. For a king who stole his throne, this was the ultimate power move. So Ælla decided to not show mercy. He wanted a crazy punishment, so he ordered Ragnar to be thrown into a pit of venomous snakes. A snake pit, can you even imagine? Yet, even as he was dying, the sagas say Ragnar delivered the most epic final words ever. He basically laughed and shouted a warning to Ælla that his sons were coming for him. How the little pigs would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers. Ælla probably thought he was just rambling. He had just killed a legend and thought he'd won. In reality, he just signed his own death warrant. He killed the boar, but he just told the piglets where to find him. And these piglets were the most feared Vikings alive. Just like Ragnar predicted, the news of his insane death got back to his sons, and they went nuclear. The sagas described the scene like a movie. Bjorn Ironside squeezed his spear so hard he left fingerprints in the wood. Another son, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, was cutting a stick and sliced his own thumb to the bone without even noticing. But the scariest reaction was from Ivar the Boneless. He stayed completely calm and asked for every single detail, planning his revenge. For Vikings, revenge was everything. You couldn't let your dad get killed like that. This wouldn't just be a raid, this would be war. So the sons of Ragnar started putting together an army. Not just any army. They assembled the great heathen army. This wasn't a small raid. We're talking hundreds of ships, thousands of warriors, all coming for one guy, King Ælla. In 865, this massive army landed in England. Ivar was a genius and didn't attack Ælla right away. He waited a whole year, getting horses and building his strength, letting the terror build. The pigs were no longer grunting. They were here. In the fall of 866, the great heathen army marched straight for York, Ælla's capital city. And because Ælla's kingdom was still a mess from his civil war, the Vikings took the city easy. It was a total blowout. This disaster was the only thing that could make Ælla and his rival Osbert team up. They put their fight aside and launched one last desperate attack to take back their city. And believe it or not, the history books say they actually broke through the Viking defenses. For a second, it looked like they might win. But the Vikings were pros at chaos. They regrouped and absolutely crushed the Northumbrian army. Both kings, Ælla and Osbert, were killed right there in the battle. And this is where things get crazy. The most reliable history book from the time says Ælla died in battle, a normal death for a king. But the Viking sagas, the stories told by the winners, tell a completely different story. They say death in battle was too good for him. Ivar the Boneless supposedly captured Ælla alive, and he had something special planned. The Viking sagas describe one of the most insane things I have ever heard. Ivar the Boneless, ready for his ultimate revenge, ordered Ælla to get the blood eagle. This wasn't a quick death. This was a ritual designed to be the most painful thing possible. Imagine this. They drag the king out in front of the entire Viking army and force him onto his stomach. First, an executioner carves a giant eagle with its wings spread out onto Ælla's back, a symbolic brand. But that's just the start. Next, they take an axe and one by one chop his ribs away from his spine to create a massive hole in his back. Some stories say they even poured salt into the open wound to make it hurt even more. And here is the final, insane step. The executioner reaches into the hole, grabs the ribs and pulls them outwards, creating a pair of bloody wings. Then they pull his lungs out through the opening and lay them on his shoulders. The sagas say the twitching of the lungs looked like a dying eagle's wings. This was the ultimate revenge. But did it actually happen? This is where we have to ask, is this story real, or is it the biggest lie in Viking history? The main problem is where the story comes from. All the super graphic details are from Viking sagas written 200 or 300 years after it happened. That's like us writing about the American Revolution based on stories we heard. The actual history written at the time, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, just says he died in battle. That's it. No mention of a blood eagle. On top of that, archaeologists have found 0 skeletons that look like this ever happened. Not one. This has led historians to a crazy theory. What if it was all a big misunderstanding? One expert, Roberta Frank, thinks that hundreds of years ago a Viking poet wrote that they carved an eagle on his back, which could have just been a cool way of saying they killed him and left his body for eagles to eat. But centuries later, writers who didn't get the metaphor took it literally and invented this insane torture ritual. But the debate isn't over. Recently, doctors and historians looked at it and said anatomically, you could do this with Viking weapons. The problem? The victim would die from shock and blood loss almost instantly. So doing the full ritual on a live person is pretty much impossible. But doing it to a body right after they died as a warning to your enemies? That might have been possible. So what's the final answer? Was Ælla just a forgotten king who died in a battle? Or was he the victim of the most brutal revenge plot ever? We will probably never know for sure. But whether it was real or fake, the blood eagle has become a legend. In Viking stories, it was the ultimate punishment, saved for the absolute worst enemies who did something unforgivable, like killing your dad. It was a personal vendetta and a terrifying public announcement not to mess with the Vikings. And today, the blood eagle is more famous than ever, thanks to shows like Vikings and video games like Assassin's Creed, Valhalla. Everyone knows what it is. It's the ultimate symbol of how brutal the Vikings were. The story of Ælla's death, real or not, made him famous, not as a king, but as the guy who got the blood eagle. King Ælla's story is an insane ride into the Viking Age, where legends are bigger than real life and revenge is an art form. He started as a nobody king in a broken kingdom who should have been a footnote in a history book. But he messed with the wrong Viking, Ragnar Lothbrok, and it led to his complete and total destruction. This king was literally swallowed by a legend, whether he died with a sword in his hand at York, like the history books say, or if he suffered the unbelievable torture of the blood eagle, like the sagas claim. His fate is a crazy reminder of what happened when these two worlds collided. The story of his death became way more powerful than his actual life, a terrifying warning about what happens when you wake up the Vikings. If you thought this story was absolutely insane, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because we have so many more crazy history stories coming. Now I need you to answer this. Do you think the Blood Eagle was real, a misunderstood poem, or Viking propaganda? Go down in the comments right now and let me know what you believe. Thanks for watching.